Greetings, humans. You have entered the Command Zone, your destination for all aspects of Elder Dragon Highlander. Enjoy your stay.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Command Zone podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Weeks.
How's it? It's Josh Lee Kwai.
And today we are discussing the oft-discussed, the hot topic. Well, I don't know how hot it is recently, but it comes up every, in rotation.
We've been talking about it for 10 years.
Yeah, since it was gone, we were like, we need it back.
Yeah.
Do we actually need a banned as a commander list?
Yeah, this used to be a official rule up until 2014 when they discontinued it. And they just said, hey, listen, cards are only going to be banned or they're not going to be banned. But they used to say, well, this little subset of cards is actually not fully banned. It's just banned as your commander. You can't have it in the command zone, but you can still have it in your 99. And then for the last decade, we haven't had that. And so the question has always comes up of should we bring that back?
Yeah. Would that solve all of the problems with our modern ban lists?
I don't know if anyone's saying it'll solve all the problems.
All the problems.
But it will help alleviate some of them.
Every problem. We're going to be talking about a lot of different cards here today. Most of them banned, but, go nuts. If you want to pick up any of those cards, go to cardkingdom.com/command and you'll be supporting the show while you do so. Card Kingdom has a huge selection of singles, sealed product. They've got it in different conditions and different printings, and they know Magic cards. These days, they keep making different versions of cards, different kinds of foils, different kinds of treatments, and when you order them with some retailers, you never have any idea what's going to show up on your doorstep. So it's nice to have one place that you trust for your cards, and they've got a ton in one spot. They can get it in one package and ship it to you safely and professionally. Plus, you know that they have the team to take care of you if something does go wrong. The mail system is not perfect, but at least you can have a good supplier to help you out. We use Card Kingdom for all of our card sharpening needs over here, and if you use them too, you can also support the show as long as you're shopping at cardkingdom.com/command.
Well, you know what's a really good holiday gift for somebody is as a cool version of their commander.
Yeah, fancy
if you know
one.
what their favorite deck is and they don't have a certain version of the commander, getting them the fancy version is a good way to go. Another great place to get holiday gifts is if you go to ultrapro.com/command. One of the things I find is it's hard to buy specific cards for decks for people because they know their decks better than you do. But often they don't have their deck fully dressed up. They don't have the playmat, the deck boxes, the sleeves that all match. If it's their mono blue deck, you could get the blue mana 8 stuff. Or you might even be able to find their particular commander on the playmat, the deck box, and the sleeves because Ultra Pro has had that license agreement with Wizards for so long that they often have a lot of the characters on there. So if you go to ultrapro.com/command, you find all kinds of cool holiday gift ideas. And of course, I think a lot of people probably like me around the holidays. You find stuff while you're looking for other people that you actually want.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, you can't always directly tell people I want to.
If you buy something for yourself, shipping's free.
Yeah, exactly. You might as well just add on to the order once the free shipping's already there. So you might find something cool for yourself as well. Ultrapro.com/command is the game accessories brand that we trust our own collections to here at the Command Zone. So can't recommend them highly enough.
If you want to get a Christmas gift for yourself, sign up for our Patreon as well at patreon.com/commandzone. All of our patrons get access to our Discord, which is a fun, lively conversation about Commander, of all things. Who could imagine? Plus, you get to talk to me, Josh, Jimmy, tons of members of our staff. If you see something on a game and you have a question, you can get in the Discord and ask them directly. It's a ton of fun in there. Plus, you get access to extra turns and game nights a day early without ads. So you get to see it before the world does. No spoilers for you. No comments below blowing it for you. There's a lot of cool upsides to being a patron, including we shout out one lucky patron every single podcast episode. And this one is dedicated to Martin Castengay.
Martin?
You rock.
You definitely rock. Another thing about our patron is there's a whole bunch of exclusive content that you only get access to if you are a patron member. So it's more than 20 hours of stuff now with all the different episodes of Turn Talk. So that is a good gift for yourself.
If you have run out of Command Zone content and you're like, there's more.
There is more.
There is.
Okay, let's go to our main topic here. So, do we need to bring back banned as a commander?
So when the big ban discussion happened a few weeks ago, and there was talks of a bracket system and there was bans, it always inevitably fills up the comments with all we need is a banned as a commander list, and that will solve a lot of issues with the current ban list. So I wanted to bring that back and actually talk through some of the reasoning to why it exists and what we think it could fix and what we think it doesn't solve, and really go through that argument because it feels like people are clamoring for an answer to that question is why don't we have a banned as a commander list? And we're going to try and provide one, or maybe we should have one. Before we get started, I do want to do our usual caveat where it's like Josh and I are on the Commander Format Advisory Panel.
Is that what it's called?
I think so. Commander Format Panel?
CFP?
I think it's CFP.
Yeah. We don't know what it's called, but we're in the group that Gavin and others that are now running the format talk to regarding, the direction of the format and the rules that they're going to do. Obviously, it's similar to what we did before in that we just give our perspective and what we're seeing from the community, and then Wizards obviously will ultimately make the decision. Does
what they want. Yeah, anything that we're saying today here is just our opinion and says nothing about what the actions behind the curtain are being discussed or are going to happen. We're just talking.
Yeah, and I will say that to this point, and it's only existed for not very long at this point, the banned as commander, I haven't had any discussions in there with anyone yet, and it's not necessarily a thing they're looking at, but because the recent tumult has kind of drummed up a little discussion about this, we thought it would be salient to talk about. I found it really interesting to kind of go back and look at the history of banned as commander and just kind of look at the timeline of, how it worked when it was a thing.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, in anything, like, is something going to work for the future? You look how it worked in the past. We've had this before. What did it do? What did it look like?
Yeah. So the timeline kind of goes like this. In 2002 is the first sort of moment where we know where any rules about Commander were kind of on anybody's radar. And then in 2006 was the first time. This is all according to the MTG Fandom wiki, by the way. A lot of this stuff, it's hard to find articles or real direct sources. So we're going off the Fandom wiki, but they seem to have kept pretty good track. So in 2006, that was the first instance where they sort of instituted banned as commander. And they did it for Heartless Hidetsugu, Karavik the Merciless, and Niv-Mizzet the Firemind. And that was in February of 2006.
So it's 4 years into Commander's, existence formally.
On the internet as we know it. It likely existed in a small original play group and a few people outside of that. But this is the first time it was like, okay, we're going to start announcing bans and treating it like a format. So yeah, 4 years in. So they did this banned as commanders. You can see that it's pretty funny, the ones they've chosen.
Yeah, commanders. They don't make commanders like they used to. Yeah. They make them way better now. Heartless Hidetsugu is a 5-mana 4/3 that taps to deal damage to each player equal to half that player's life total rounded down.
Yeah.
So it halves everybody's life total when it taps.
Yeah.
It was a very powerful commander for years, but I haven't seen it in ages. Karavik the Merciless is a 7-mana Rakdos commander that says whenever an opponent casts a spell, Karavik the Merciless deals damage equal to that spell's mana value to any target. Very powerful.
Still pretty good.
7 mana.
7 mana, and definitely they put it in precons now if they feel like it. It's not that powerful. Yeah.
And I haven't seen it in the command zone
as well. Yeah.
Have you seen Karavik the Merciless in the command zone?
I mean, not in a long, long time.
Yeah, not in years. And then finally, Niv-Mizzet the Firemind. We've had 2 Niv-Mizzets since then, and they're both better. Is 2 blue, red, flying. When you draw a card, Niv-Mizzet deals 1 damage to any target. Tap to draw a card.
A famous 2-card combo with Curiosity, which was one of the early instances of hey, there's half of your combo is in the command zone type of deal. So anyway, the funny thing about this is in February of 2006, they banned these 3 cards as commander. And then in November of the same year, they unban all of them.
Right. And what is that, 9 months later?
Yeah. So I don't know where they were gathering data or how that worked back then. I actually don't know how it works now either. But they very quickly were like, we don't really need those banned. So they unbanned them. And then it took until early in the following year, they took a look at Raphelos, Landwar Emissary, and that was the next card to be banned as commander in 2007. And it was the only one on the list at that time.
Right.
And Raphelos taps for mana equal to the number of creatures you control.
Forests.
No, sorry. Equal to the number of forests you control. And it's it's interesting to me that the first 4 cards they banned, 2 of them are about dealing damage to everybody.
Damage combo.
And this one's about fast mana.
Right.
So they're kind of, searching around for what is powerful. And these are early days, obviously. And then 2 years later, in 2009, they unbanned Rafellos from the banned as commander list. And then 1 year after that, in 2010, they put it back on the banned as commander list.
Right.
So they were like, is it really that bad? Yeah, it was. Let's put it back on there, is
Right.
sort of what it feels like. In the intervening time, in 2009, when Rafellos is unbanned, not at the exact same time, but around that time, Braid's Cabal Minion is also placed on the banned as commander list and is the only one on there for a second while Rafellos kind of like
Came off, went on.
Yeah, they experiment with it. Is it bad? And then, yeah. So, and Braids is something that makes each player sacrifice an artifact, creature, or land at the beginning of that player's upkeep.
Very easy to power this out on turn 1 or 2 and lock all of the players out of the game while you slowly hit them with a 2/2.
Yeah, that's the problem is you Dark Ritual into it or something like that, Mana Vault into it, and then
Right.
just the game becomes a real slog. So that was the second card put on there. And then in 2011, Arayo Soratami Ascendant is placed onto the banned as commander list. And this is a card that is one of those flip cards that has half a card on top and half a card on
from
bottom.
Kamigawa.
And you rotate it around when it becomes the other part of it.
Super tap it.
Yeah, now we would probably make an MDFC or something that transforms into the other side of the card, but they didn't do that back then. I don't think they had that technology. And what this does is once it becomes rotated to its other side, it counters the first spell that each player casts each turn. So it's another card that just kind of slogs the game down, makes it sort of a real chore to play. And that's interesting because, again, the first 3 cards we saw were like a lot of damage combo. Then we saw a fast mana card in Rafellos. And then the last 2, Braids and Arayo, are definitely like slogfest.
Like grindy negative play patterns.
This is
generally.
not fun type of game that we want type of card. They're not necessarily super powerful, although they both are powerful.
Right.
But it's not because they're primarily like unbeatable.
It's also worth noting that Rafellos, Braids, and Arayo are still banned.
Yes.
They're fully banned.
Yeah. So in 2012, Kokusho, the Evening Star, becomes banned as commander. Now, this is an interesting case because Kokusho was just straight up banned, like regular banned, in 2008. And then 4 years later, they decide, and this is kind of the first case of this we see on the ban list, which is kind of going to dovetail into our discussion. They see like, oh, Kokusho's not so bad when it's in the 99. It's really when you have access to it all the time in your command zone that it becomes banned. And so they move it into the banned as commander list. So you can see this as an upgrade. Like it was fully banned and now it's only half banned or whatever.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
You can still play it on the 99. Kokusho is interesting because it's sort of closer to the damage.
Yes. I'd say it's more like Karavek and it's more like Hidetsugu than it is like Braids and Arayo.
Right. Or like Rafellos.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's nothing like those other cards, really. It's a little bit combo-y, maybe, but there's not like an obvious 2-card combo that you use with it. But it's definitely more on the side of like, oh, the amount of differential between the amount of damage it's doing is what's the problem. Or the life gain's a part of it, obviously.
Yeah, I think like this and in Karavek and Heartless Hidetsugu, I think the bans are largely about how it scales with multiplayer as a format. Yeah. And it just makes the card so much better because there's multiple players.
Yeah.
And I think that they were really focused on that end of things.
They were really worried about that earlier on.
Right.
And we don't worry about it as much anymore.
Because so many cards are designed for multiplayer anyway, or just a lot of cards are broken with multiplayer, like Rhystic Study.
And I think one thing we've discovered is part of the fun of Commander is figuring out when the cards are they were balanced for standard and now they're extra good over here and being able to spot and evaluate when the cards are, quote unquote, a little more broken because of the circumstance of Commander specifically. Right. And we should say Kokusho is a card that when it dies, each of your opponents lose 5 life, and you gain life equal to the amount of life lost this way. So generally, it dies 5 to all your opponents, you gain 15, and the ability to resurrect it, recur it, and do that a few times can create like a pretty big gap. You know, all your opponents, even if you don't win, lost 20, and you gained, 60.
Yeah.
We see that in, they learned from this in design, and future cards that do similar things usually don't say equal to the amount of life lost this way, and they usually cap it. So each of your opponents lose 1 life, and you gain 1 life. You don't gain life equal to the amount lost this way.
Right.
Which is interesting. Okay, so then that was in 2012 when Kokusho got put on the banned as commander list, and then in 2014, the RC actually that's the point at which they decide, you know what, banned as commander, we're getting rid of it. That's not going to exist anymore.
So at that point, what was on the banned as a commander list? It was Kakusho, Braids, Arayo, and Rafellos.
Right.
Those are the 4. Okay.
Yeah, those were the 4. And so so that leaves those 4 cards in limbo because they were on the banned as commander list and that doesn't exist anymore. What do we do with those cards? And they decide Kakusho is just going to be completely unbanned.
Okay.
You can play it. And Rafellos, Arayo, and Braids are going to go onto the regular ban list. And that's kind of where we've sat until now. And all of those cards are still where they were.
Right. They haven't moved since 2014.
Yeah. So in 10 years, they haven't done anything, which means that the Wizards could ban them tomorrow.
Okay.
Because that's how things work. But so then that just sort of leaves us with the question, if we're going to talk about banned as commander, what legendary creatures are even on the ban list right now that you might even think about moving over?
Right.
If you said, okay, let's open it back up, actually, let's reinstate the banned as commander list, which cards would it have the most chance of affecting? And I would say that would be the legendary creatures that are currently on the ban list.
Right.
Obviously, there are cards now, commanders now, that you might say, oh, instead of banning them, we could sort of half ban them and put them onto the banned as commander list. So that's the other side of this coin. But anyway.
I think starting with the creatures that are the legendary creatures that are currently banned.
Yep.
That evaluating why they're on the ban list and if they would be banned as a commander or if they're on the ban list because of what they do in the 99 is like a big consideration of just like where would this banned as a commander list wind up if it happened to come back.
Yeah. Okay. So Braids, Arayo, and Rafellos are obviously still on that list and, could be candidates for going back on the banned as commander list. They were there before. The next one up is Emrakul, the Aeon's Torn, which was banned in 2010. I think I made an interesting note. This 2010 banning coincided with the official renaming of the format to Commander. It used to be Elder Dragon Highlander, EDH. And it coincided with the release of the first Commander product, which was Commander 2011. Remember, they used to, if a core set was named like M14, it actually came out in 2013.
Right. They
would name it because of big box retailers for the following year. Because big box retailers never want to sell anything old, so you would make it look like it was from the future. I don't know. It's weird.
It's like cars.
Yeah. Anyway, Emrakul, the Aeon's Torn, famously a huge mana cost thing, but has a huge effect on the game when it comes in. Can't be countered, gives extra turns,
Annihilator
protection
6.
from everything, Annihilator 6. Yeah, it's pretty brutal.
This is not banned because it's a good, powerful commander.
Right.
Like Emrakul in the command zone, obviously you could have a deck that's full of ramp and you could cast Emrakul out of the command zone, but
it's 15 mana. It will still take a while.
Yeah, I think it's banned largely because of what you can do with it in the 99. There's a lot of commanders that are designed around cost reduction, especially cost reduction of colorless creatures.
Yeah.
So Emrakul, not 15 mana, largely free.
Yeah, it's the sneak attacks and the show and tells and that kind of thing.
Yeah, Rakdos Lord of Riots.
Yeah, through the breach and things like that. Just decks that are like, hey, I'm never going to pay the mana cost. I'm cheating it out early, and that's really why Emrakul is banned. It's not, you're right, because it's commander. The next card on the list was banned in 2012, and it was just straight up banned in 2012. This is a time, Emrakul will say also, both could have been put on ban as a commander because that did exist at the time they were banned, but the rules committee did not do that. And Gristlebrand is the same. And Gristlebrand was just straight up banned. It's 4 and 4 black, so 8 mana for a 7/7 flying lifelink. It says pay 7 life, draw 7 cards. Pay 7 life, draw 7 cards. You want to pay 14 and draw 14? Sure.
Go nuts.
21 and 21? Do it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Gristlebrand was put directly on the ban list, I think, for a reason. It looks not dissimilar from Yawgmoth's Bargain, which is also on the ban list. You have to pay bigger chunks of life, and it costs 2 extra mana, but it's also a creature that's easier to cheat out, easier to reanimate.
It also has the life gain on it to give some of it back to you. Yeah.
And again, this is 8 mana. This isn't banned because it's too powerful in the command zone. This is banned because it's too powerful an effect to have in commander.
Well, and just think now, like you play some like, Thrill of Possibility, and then you animate Dead It on turn, 2 or 3. And then it's really hard to deal with if you're not in blue because you go to remove it and they're like, cool, in response, I draw 14.
I draw 14.
Yeah.
And It's banned largely because it makes for non-games, right? If you can just draw your whole deck on turn, like we have 40 life. How many sevens go into that?
Yeah,
5.
6 is 42.
Yeah, there you go. All right, so
you could do 6 if you hit once with this or do something else.
Yeah, so you can pay 35 life, you draw 35 cards.
Yeah.
And it's just like turn 1 or 2. It invalidates the game and doesn't make it feel like a good tussle.
In a lot of ways. Necropotence is sort of the closest thing we've got, and it has a few more guardrails on it, harder to reanimate. Also, the way that the card draw works is like you don't get them till your end step, and you kind of got to, like, it's different enough, and I think that's the thing that people compare to. But yeah, this was obviously banned because of the 99 and not, again, because of the command zone, because it's harder actually to cheat it out from the command zone. So that makes sense. Okay, the next one wasn't until 2017. So this is after the ban as commander went away. And so now we can start to sort of guess or speculate on whether the rules committee would have pushed this on ban as commander if it was still existed. And this next banned card or legendary creature was Leovold, Emissary of Trest, which is famously sort of a wheel commander.
Right.
It didn't read that way initially when people read it, but it got to, like, pretty quickly everyone was building their decks to just wheel with it because Leovold says each opponent can't draw more than 1 card each turn. And it also says whenever you or a permanent you control becomes the target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, you may draw a card, which is the minimal part of it. Really, you would get Leovold out and try and windfall or something like that as soon as possible, and everyone would draw 1 except for you would draw full hand.
Right. I think this is the first one that I look at and would say that this would be on the banned as a commander list, largely because there are similar effects that are unbanned that go in the 99. The Notion Thief is in the 99. Narset's in the 99. People will point to Hullbreacher is banned. This is not Hullbreacher. This effect is not as powerful as Hullbreacher. It doesn't have flash. It's 3 colors. It still allows you to draw a card. It doesn't make treasures. There's a lot of reasons why Hullbreacher is
absolutely
more band worthy than Leovold. So I think this is the first one I would look at and be like, okay, this is a candidate for a banned as commander list if that were to happen in the future.
Yeah, I think notably it doesn't have red. So how many Sultai wheel decks are out there right now? There's probably a few, but it's not the common color combination that you put in when you think of the Riels and the, Shabraz and Braylon and things like that and Locust Gods. They mostly have red because red has the most wheel effects. So Leovold created a Sultai wheel deck that doesn't really exist outside of there's not a Sultai commander that's really good for it. And so I even think, you could definitely put this as a banned commander because what 99s does it go into? Yeah. It's like fine. It's not like a bad card, but it's not going to be backbreaking and it's not going to be good in a lot of decks. You're going to draw it in a lot of situations where like your deck's not really built around doing what it wants to do anyway. Yeah. So, that's a good candidate. Okay, in 2019, we had the next legendary creature get banned. This was a little controversial at the time because it had been sitting around not banned for years and years and years. It's another 9-mana commander. It's Iona, Shield of Emeria.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't a particularly fun card. It's when it enters the battlefield, choose a color. Your opponents can't cast spells of the chosen color. So you can lock out monocolor decks entirely. You can lock out half of a deck if they're in 2 colors. It's a 9-mana angel that if it's on the battlefield, you're in trouble.
Yeah, you can definitely pick certain decks that don't get to play, especially if they're monocolored.
This certainly wasn't a popular commander, and honestly, it wasn't that popular in the 99, but it wasn't banned because it was a lockout commander that people were putting in their decks. I guess that's a possibility. But because people play like Avacyn, but Avacyn's cool. Like this is a slightly less cool.
Well, Avacyn has a strategy tied to it, right? Like, it's not the funnest of strategies maybe, but at least it's like, hey, Wrath a lot or something like that. Take advantage of it. Iona doesn't really have a specific strategy to it.
You stop.
Yeah. What's either a monocolor deck at the table or the deck that most of my opponents share, the color that most of my opponents share. Pick that.
It also, this coincides with the unbanning of Painter Servant, and a lot of people say, because Painter Servant was legal, now they banned Iona. I don't know if that's quite reason enough for me to have a 9-mana card banned because it could be combined with another card.
Right, so Painter Servant allows you to sort of change the color of all the cards in all the decks to a certain color. And yes, it is a combo, but worse than a lot of 2-card combos that already exist. But yeah, that was kind of the cover, I think, at the time. Okay, if Iona's gone, we can let Painter Servant loose, and as it turns out, nobody cares and nobody plays Painter Servant, so it doesn't really matter. Yeah, I think Iona is similar to Gristlebrand, right? Yeah. In that it was in the 99 banning, you didn't see a lot of dedicated Iona decks existing, and that would not necessarily go on the banned commander list today. Right. Because it doesn't fit the bill of Leovold, basically.
Right.
Yeah. All right. The next one was in 2020. This was I would say this is one of the more controversial bannings since we started this podcast. It was Golos.
Yep.
Tireless Pilgrim. Golos, it gets you a land when it comes into play, and then it has an activated ability that lets you kind of like play things for quote unquote free.
He's a 5-color, generically good, solemn simulacrum commander.
Sort of, yeah. I should have said the part where it is a 5-color commander because it has a 5-color activated ability, but it costs only 5 generic mana to play it. And that was part of the quote-unquote problem at the time. It was also the most popular commander, according to EDH Rec at the time. Number 1. Not like among, but the most.
The most, yeah. The reasoning behind the Golos ban was that it eliminates creativity in the commander meta because anything could have like Golos as the commander. You could build not strictly, but you could build a better Enchantress deck by just putting Golos in the command zone. You could build a better any typal deck could be improved by putting Golos in the command zone. Was the original reasoning
that
for
was the reasoning
ban.
They stated. I don't agree with it, but yeah, they said that at the time was that, you know, a lot of decks you could just literally swap out Golos for whatever that deck had as their commander, and it would just strictly make it better. Yeah, I struggled to really list what those decks were at the time, and I still struggle to list them, but that is the argument that was made.
I think this is another obvious commander option for the banned as a commander list, because the stated problem is that it was too popular and too all-encompassing and harmed the creativity, which is like a core pillar of commander. Yeah,
that it made it sort of like monotonous, or everything's the same. Homogenous.
Homogenous,
is what I was looking for. Yeah. And so that was a command zone problem. That was not a in the 99 problem. So it feels like if banned as commander existed, Golos could maybe have gone on there.
Right.
All right. Next up is Nadu, which was just banned. Just banned recently, and nobody disagreed with it. This was not controversial at all.
Nope.
Even though that banning was very controversial at the time, but it was the other cards.
Yeah, and this is banned. This is banned for its Paradox Engine style effect because it says creatures you control have, whenever this creature becomes the target of a spell or ability, reveal the top card of your library. If it's a land card, put it onto the battlefield. Otherwise, put it onto your hand. This ability triggers only twice each turn.
For each of your creatures.
For each of your creatures twice. So this goes infinite with a million things.
Yeah.
This is extremely easy to trigger, and it is non-deterministic. It is a combo that can go on for some amount of time, but is a possibility of whiffing. It's very Paradox Engine. It takes a long time, hard to track.
Oh, God, the accounting for it is nuts. How many times have each one done? How many?
We watched Pro Tour Nadu. It was miserable, and this was banned because of that misery in the 99, or very clearly in the command zone.
Yeah, and I guess we didn't go back and kind of compare these last few to the sort of early bannings and where they fall, but Nadu's definitely more on the Braids of Rayo side of things, of like just kind of miserable to play against, kind of miserable to play with as well. Yeah, whereas say Iona is kind of like that, Leovold's kind of like that. Golos is in its own weird category that they haven't really addressed before, which is homogenous gameplay or repetitive gameplay. Yeah, so it seems like Gristlebrand was really a power level thing, so maybe it's closer to Raphelos, or it's not mana, but it's cards.
Yeah.
So I'd put it in the sort of similar to the Raphelos camp.
I would agree with that. And I think like Emrakul is probably in the toxic to play against type category, but it was also just strictly banned because...
Yeah, it might be, that one seems like it's almost more like Nimizid or something, where it's like
a combo piece.
Yeah, it's not an infinite combo, but it's, exactly. It's more on a power level interaction side than a miserable to play against, although Emrakul probably falls in all of those. Yeah, okay. And then there's one more, and it's a special case, and this one was
actually... special boy.
Yeah, and this one was actually banned in 2020, so we went out of chronological for this one, and it was banned 1 month after Golos, and this is Lutri the Spell Chaser. This is famously a companion, which we'll talk about in a second. It has flash, and it basically is like a dual caster mage. You fork something.
Yeah, it's not banned for that, though.
It's not banned at all because of what it does, because what it does, there's other cards that do it. It's banned because of the companion part.
Right.
So, boy.
So companion sets a rule for your deck where it's a deck building restriction that allows you to play this as an additional card in your hand. The Lutri
it's technically a card that starts the game outside the game.
Right. Yeah.
But
it's in your sideboard, which Commander doesn't have, but it's in a special companion zone. It says each non-land card in your starting deck has a different name. Oh, well, Commander That's the rule anyway. So there's
all the
no
decks in
restriction.
Commander, yeah.
There's no restriction on Lutri as a card, which makes it just closer to a Golos ban, honestly. It can just be in every blue and red deck, with the exception of Dragon's Approach decks.
There's literally no reason not to have Lutri as a companion for any Commander deck that has blue and red.
Yeah.
Because the cost is literal 0, and it just is an extra card that you have access to. Now, they nerfed how companions work to try and depower them at a certain point. Clearly, companions were an experiment that was sort of tried and failed. But the problem was that there's just no balancing of this in any way because it's only upside for decks that have blue and red. There's no other balancing factor.
Yeah. So there's financial implications for you just should have a dozen of these and they should be attached to all of your blue and red decks. There's a homogenous reasoning behind this. It just would show up in every game, likely. And then there's just the power level here is just a free card that means you should strictly sort of be looking at blue and red stronger than the other two color combinations because you get an extra card.
Yeah, and this is a legendary creature, so technically we're talking about it here, but it falls outside of what we're talking about, I think, in that it's really about the companion rule and how that works. It's not a thing where, like, banning it as commander still doesn't solve the problem.
Right. You'd have to ban it as a companion.
Yeah.
Which is yet a third ban list with its own restrictions.
Which we'll talk about later. But anyway, we did want to mention it so people will go, why did you mention Lutri?
We've gone through, so those are the banned legendary creatures. And the only really ones that we've talked about going on that list are the original 3, Braids Arayo and Rafellos were originally banned as a commander. And then we've talked about Leovold, Golos, and that's it?
Yep.
And that's it. Leovold and Golos.
Yep.
So that's sort of the 5 most commonly considered cards that could be on a banned as a commander list.
Right.
Even Arayo sort of fluctuates between banned as a commander or straight up banned. I think depends on who you would ask where that sits. And then most people who are in who think there should be a banned as a commander list also think that Lutri should be banned as a companion. So that is the most popular pitch for banned as a commander is those 4 to 5 cards plus Lutri.
Right. And then, of course, we haven't discussed, and we're going to, the cards that are not currently banned at all, that may be the legendary creatures or commanders that could be moved onto such a list to sort of half ban them.
The most common pitch for that is Tergrid, which is a on the braids scale, probably. Whenever an opponent sacrifices a non-token permanent or discards a permanent card, you may put that card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. So the deck is designed to strip your opponents of their hands, sacrifice all their permanents, and steal all of them and slowly win the game. Yeah,
it's often mass discard. It falls into the sort of Leovold or Arayo Braids category of, like, it is just kind of miserable to play against. Miserable in quotes. I know some people like that style of Magic, and I'm not judging those people, but based upon like why the categories they've banned things of in the past, this falls into that, that bucket.
Yeah. So looking at those, like 5 commanders, 6 commanders with Arayo, I want to talk about what makes a commander bannable before we go into any additional ones that could be considered for this list.
Okay.
Because I do think we know what can makes a card bannable. It's something that they've talked about to a great extent. Do we agree? But we know what the stated reasoning for making a card bannable is, right? It impacts the socialness, the creativity, or the stability of the format as a whole is the stated the rules committee's reasoning on what makes a card bannable. Right. Obviously, we have yet to decide what Wizards' stated list of bannableness is.
Right.
But I think commanders have a lower threshold for what makes them bannable because of the power of the command zone. Mm-hmm. Like, if we look at Braids as a card, it is not a strictly powerful card. But if you look at it in the command zone, you're like, I understand why we're looking at this card. So if the command zone didn't exist, Braids wouldn't be banned, which is just true.
Right. If the command zone didn't exist, it would just be Legacy or maybe Canadian Highlander, and we would look at their ban lists because Yeah.
But there's just a lower floor for banning a card as a commander, which means that we'd likely have more liberal rules for what makes a card bannable as a commander.
Yeah,
if
that makes sense. Yep.
Yeah. So I want to sort of draw some kind of line based on what we've looked at, based on these cards that we've discussed already.
Yep.
So this is Turgid, Leovold, Araya, Braids, and Rafellos. And then there's Golos and Lutri, which Lutri is his own special boy, but they make the game less creative. So that's sort of its own reason for being banned as a commander.
Yeah, it's the homogenous bucket.
Right. So Rafellos, though, lives in sort of a separate space in my head. Like
I would call that the pure power level.
Pure power level.
Yeah.
So we've got like unfun play patterns, pure power, and then harms creativity overall is like sort of the three things that we've looked at for commanders historically.
Yeah, it's unfun, power level, and homogeneity.
So I think that's the next question is like, okay, so if Rafellos is banned as a commander, then what? Like there is a lot of powerful commanders that are very, very popular commanders that could fall in, like meet those qualifications for banned as a commander. Like Urza is the first one that I think of. Urza's, I think, a strictly more powerful magic card than Rafellos.
I would agree.
It also creates negative play patterns when combined with like Winter Orbs and that kind of thing.
Yep.
So would we start looking at cards that have never been discussed to be banned before if this list were to exist?
Yeah, I think when people are talking about this, they're talking about it only as if we would unban certain cards and put them onto the ban as commander list, and it would sort of half unshackle certain cards.
Right.
But there's the other side of that coin, which is, okay, all of a sudden there's a bunch of cards that you could half shackle.
Right.
And that would be like Urza, or I think of Keenan when I think of Rafellos.
Sure, yeah.
Because it's 2 mana, it's a similar type, create a lot of mana, and I think Keenan is way more powerful than Rafellos is. I don't think that's particularly close. And so if the stated reason that Rafellos is banned is power, then if there are other cards that are very similar that are more powerful, Urza, Keenan, you could probably name a bunch.
Yeah.
Do you have to then say, well, Keenan is
Banned as
a commander?
Because I think people think are like, well, we take the ban list
Yeah.
and we're just going to play with these ban cards.
Yeah.
But if you make a new ban list with different qualifications, we've already talked about how this has a lower floor for bannability because of how powerful the command zone is. There's new qualifications. Well, that opens the door to a bunch of new cards that have never been considered before. And suddenly we're having conversations about Yuriko
Yeah.
and Derevi.
I mean, I think you're like Timna,
You sure?
Thrasios, Keurig, Najila.
If we're talking about like
all of a sudden, if you're
Yeah.
talking about power level, I think all of those are more powerful than Rafellos.
Yeah, if we're talking about negative play patterns, do we look at Grand Arbiter Augustine?
Yeah.
Do we look at Tiny Bones?
Yeah,
do
as
we
soon
look
as-
at other Tiny Bones?
As soon as you're talking about like, oh, these are not fun to play against, that list is also very long. Yeah. Grand Arbiter is like, yeah, classic groaner.
Right. And is that just stacks and sacrifice strategies? Or does that get into long-term cascade strategies?
Yeah.
Does that get into like super busted if they untap with them, like they win the game stuff? Like this is the list. It gets longer and longer and longer the closer you look at what makes a commander powerful, because commanders are powerful. You shouldn't have access to a card ad infinitum or just paying 2 more extra. That's busted.
You know what this conversation reminds me of?
What?
The conversation around what cards should be banned or not.
Yeah.
So it's just like, oh, we have to have this conversation twice. Because it's the same thing with ban cards. Why is this banned? Why is that unbanned? This card's more powerful but not on the ban list than this one that is less powerful. Where do you draw that line? Oh, other cards like this card on the ban list are not banned. You know, it's the same conversation. Like this, we go round and round over the regular ban list. So there's no reason to believe that it would be any markedly different. It's just
more
you
clear.
also have another list that you argue with. The same, you grapple with the same problems over here with this list, and then you grapple with them with that one over there, and then you probably have to come to the same conclusions, which is like there is no good way to solve it, so you just arbitrarily draw the line somewhere, and wherever that is, and then it gets moved from time to time because that's just the way that thinking evolves, or other cards come out, or anything. What else? And then you look back and you're like, well, they used to think Karavek was too powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's still, some cards that from that era are still on the ban list, and that's just the nature of this beast. So you're just going to be having that conversation 2 times. You're going to just have to do that twice.
Yeah. And you're going to have to explain that it's 2 different lists and they have 2 different qualifications. It gets really, really complicated. Now, I want to get into like what pros are there to this list and what other problems does a second list create. We've got a lot more to talk about, but we've got to hear a few words from our sponsors first.
All right, I will untap. I'll draw a card.
Hey, have you guys seen Jimmy in like, I don't know, the past 2 weeks?
I think he left with a big backpack and said he had important company business.
Oh, bad news, guys. I went door to door in Burbank and sold almost no Command Zone merch.
Why would you do that? We already sell stuff super easily on Shopify.
Oh, yeah.
Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. Whether you're working out of your friend's apartment or from a full office suite, Shopify is there to help you grow. I mean, you remember when we started the podcast, we weren't even thinking about merch. But when fans started asking for it, Shopify made it easy. They handled the selling so we could focus on the content. There's a reason Shopify powers 10% of all e-commerce in the US. They've got great customer service, useful tools for your business, and the internet's best converting checkout system. So you never have any trouble turning browsers into buyers.
Man, that's way better than what I was doing.
Wait, did you actually sell anything?
No, but I did see Timothy Chalamet at the gas station. He didn't see me.
Sneaky Timmy.
Upgrade your business and get the same checkout we use. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/TCZ, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/TCZ to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/TCZ.
And then I will play Brainstorm, which lets me draw 3 cards and puts my storm count to 8.
Oh no, this turn is taking forever. He could be going for like 10 more minutes and I'm starving.
10 minutes? That's more than enough time to prepare a delicious meal from Factor.
Holy crap, how are we hearing each other's thoughts?
Remember, last turn I played telepathy.
Oh, right.
Anyway, with Factor you can get fresh, chef-crafted meals delivered straight to your door that are ready to eat in just 2 minutes. And they have a ton of options to choose from each week, so you'll never get bored.
Unlike this term.
That's right. No prep, cooking, or cleanup means I could be done eating before this storm count hits 30.
Exactly. And Factor is way healthier
And I will
cheap.
destroy telepathy.
Cheaper than takeout. And it tastes better too.
What are you guys talking about?
Nothing.
Ooh, yeah, imagine if I was chowing down on their delicious spinach and mushroom chicken thighs right now.
Hey, were you guys talking telepathically without me again?
Maybe.
No.
We love Factor and we know you will too. Get 50% off and free shipping on your first Factor box using our link. Click the link in the description or scan the QR code with your phone. It directly supports the channel and helps us make more content. So click the link or scan the code and start eating better with Factor.
Then I will cast a Fabricate.
Jordan, tell the truth. Is your turn almost over?
Yeah.
Really?
No.
All right, it's chicken time.
I'm going to.
Sorry, I just discovered that I've been paying for 2 Netflix accounts. I'm Kian, and I may be and have a corrupted memory. But with all the services and subscriptions these days, how can anyone remember it all? Thankfully, I have Rocket Money to ease my burden. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It's hard enough keeping track of whether my power is odd or even. I can't be constantly checking all my accounts. But Rocket Money's dashboard lets me see all of my subscriptions in one place, so I know exactly where my money keeps disappearing to. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's features. They even alert me if a bill increases in price, or if an unexplained charge appears out of nowhere.
Stop wasting money on things you don't use. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions by going to rocketmoney.com/commandzone. That's rocketmoney.com/commandzone. Again, rocketmoney.com/commandzone.
You browsing for some new tech?
Yeah, I'm building T-Mount and ARCHIDEKT. Ooh, how about Zergo and Ojutai?
Did you just drag and drop that card image directly into your deck?
Yep, with ARCHIDEKT, you can drag and drop card images from EDH, Rec, or Scryfall directly into the deck list. No typing required.
That is so cool.
Ooh, okay, check this out. I'm gonna drag and drop Dragon Storm into the deck, and then boom, I'm gonna drop a bunch of dragons on the battlefield.
A 9-drop, huh? Seems ambitious.
It was just for the pun. ARCHIDEKT is the best place to browse, brew, and playtest commander decks. Just go to archidekt.com/commandzone to get started.
That's ARCHIDEKT.com/commandzone. All right, we are back. We are talking about should the banned as a commander list be reinstated, or what are the pros and cons of doing so? Mm-hmm. We have already sort of gone over the history of banned as a commander and then talked about sort of what the qualifications would be, or the reasoning behind why you would ban things.
Just what the list would look like generally before we talk about the pros and cons.
Yeah, and I really like these three sort of buckets that we've seen that from bans in the past, which is like unfun. We might ban it because of that. We might ban it from just power level, and then we also might ban it because of it makes the format homogenous. It sort of makes everything. It's the vanilla. It's going to make everything taste the same. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, by the way, vanilla is great. I don't judge anybody who loves vanilla.
It's me. Okay. Mono white.
But there are reasons why banned as a commander, like people that want it back, aren't wrong about some stuff.
It is appealing in certain ways.
Yeah, there are things that it would do that are good.
Yeah, I think for the most part it would. Full disclosure, so when we were on the Commander Advisory Group, I was a part of a subcommittee that discussed the pros and cons of banned as a commander and sort of went down a deep rabbit hole. We talked about what cards like commanders would be considered, what positives and negatives, that kind of thing. And I went into that subcommittee as like a person who thought this was a positive and was an easy thing we can do to improve the format.
You were a proponent of returning to banned as a commander when
I was going into the committee. Yes.
That implies.
And it implies that coming out of doing this committee, after discussing all the logistics and discussing like Urza and Korvold and what it does to those commanders, I was less high on it as an option and ended up coming out of it as like it wouldn't harm anything, which isn't reason enough to do it, in my opinion. So we all sort of landed on it would be fine and would it have small benefits, but also has a bunch of sort of dovetailing effects. So I want to talk about some of those positives, why I was interested in it first. Yeah. And the big thing I think that a lot of people, the reason it appeals to people is because it clarifies some of the ban reasoning. Like you look at Lutri on the ban list and you're like, what? Why is this banned and Dualcaster Mage isn't?
Right.
And you have to know more about Commander and know more about the cards to be able to be like, oh, it's because of Companion, it's because it's a free card. It needs a little bit more circles on the card to actually explain why it's on the ban list. So having things that say this is banned as a Companion, this is banned as a Commander, gives you a reason why it's on the ban list and makes it look a little bit more logical. Mm-hmm. And I think Golos is a good example of that as well. Like it doesn't look bannable until you consider the command zone of it all.
It's funny because I'm on such polar opposite sides of the fence for those two specific cards, right?
Yeah.
So I've talked about this many times that I'm like don't ban anything guy, or was on the Commander Advisory Group, and that's a little bit of a simplification because there were cards where I did say, okay, this is probably fine to ban, or maybe we even should ban this card. It was just very rare for me to do that. So Lutri was one of the ones where I was like, yeah, we should ban it.
Yeah. Were you pro Companions as a whole, or were you against having them as an option in Commander?
I was fine with Companions, but I thought, and Lutri, we banned before the card got released.
Yeah.
So it was banned from the preview, which is very rare. Usually the RC and the CAG took a wait and see approach. And, Hull Breacher was one like that, where everyone was like, I don't know about that card. Let's see what it does. And then as it was going, everyone was like, oh, it's what we thought. Maybe let's ban it. And Hull Breacher is another one I didn't fight very hard. I was like, you know what? I think we could keep it. I think we could allow the people that like it to have it. But at the same time, I think it's not crazy to ban that card. Now, Golos, I was on the complete other side. I was like, this is crazy. It's the most popular commander. It is the number one. People like it a lot. We should not be banning that. And it's not for power level. You can't make the claim that it's like winning every CEDH tournament because that's not what's happening. Yeah. So I didn't like that homogenous bucket because homogeneity is. So what if people like playing all the cards that you get bored by is Cyclonic Rift and Risk Study and whatever. But if people like that, who are you to tell them they don't like it? So Golos, I was on the total opposite side. So it's funny that this rule is trying to solve those two cards,
one which feels very obvious, and the other one which is very debatable to this day.
Yeah.
Golos remains one of the most contentious bans on the ban list, I think, with the exception of the more recent ones, which are still simmering.
Yeah, which let's not talk about. We're trying to avoid it.
We're not talking about
We
those.
didn't talk about Nadu, which I thought was interesting, just to go back for a second.
Yeah.
Because neither of us really talked about it, but like, if it was banned as commander, is it okay?
No.
It's still like you might draw it?
Yeah,
Or,
it's
also
still in the
green.
99. Like, it still goes in all Simic really powerful decks.
Well, you have to be doing specific things for it to be good. Not every Simic deck is doing what Nadu wants, but I think there would be a lot of Nadu decks that existed that were just like, because green's so good at finding creatures, that were just like, I'm going to find Nadu, and then I'm going to do the Nadu thing, so I'm just going to build a Nadu deck.
Yeah.
And I think, let's say Nadu was like an Is-It, I think it might be okay in the 99.
Sure.
I guess, yeah, it might still be tough, but at least, you couldn't, tutor for it as easily.
Yeah, I think it's something close to like a Prophet of Krufix, right? Where it's like, I mean, a Prophet of Krufix is a legendary.
But
really
every deck
need to
has
ban.
lands and things to untap and cast with their lands. Not every deck has things that target its own things.
But it just becomes strictly right to build around Nadu if you're in those colors. Like, there's no more powerful strategy in green and blue, in my opinion. It goes really well with landfall. It goes really well with like the go wide creature strategies that green and blue like to do. It's good with so many other cards.
I don't know, though.
Like,
Keenan decks didn't become Nadu decks, and they wouldn't. Keenan decks would still be really good Keenan decks.
Sure, yeah. That's doing something different. That's true.
I do agree, but I just think Nadu was an interesting case that we just kind of skipped over.
Yeah.
Which is like, I just keep it banned because that card just, like, there's no good that comes of it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's kind of a little bit on the line of like, I don't think it's as good when it's not in your command zone because
Certainly
of the
not,
fact that
no.
like, there's a lot of decks with green and blue. And we're not even counting the decks that are like 4-color and 3-color that just aren't doing any of the target your own stuff thing. So...
Yeah, I just think it rhymes with Paradox Engine in my head, where it makes for really long, non-deterministic combos that you have to sit and wait while they slowly figure out this mess, and you're probably dead, but you're not definitely dead. But so I'm gonna go get a drink, and we'll be back, and you're gonna tell me if I'm dead.
Right,
And
but
they're
that
like,
puts
I'm
it
not
more in
even sure.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, but that puts it in the unfun to play against, which I guess we agree is, you know what had happened? It's in Sultai decks, and then you just are tutoring for it in two different ways. Yeah, I think Nadu decks would still exist, and that's part of the problem.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, anyway, going back to the clarification. Sorry, I derailed this.
No, that's okay. It's the reasoning I was finishing up was it just makes the ban list make more sense. If you put it in buckets and you give it like broad reasoning for why it's banned, then you look at the ban list and you understand it more inherently.
Yeah. Do you think it would be better in general if they just had the ban list in buckets when you looked at it? Unfun, too powerful, homogenous.
Maybe.
Then at least when you look at it, people would be like, okay.
They put little paragraphs that like explain each card, and there's certainly some cards
But people
that
ain't
aren't
reading
gonna,
paragraphs.
Yeah, paragraphs is a lot. So I do think that like some amount of that does kind of help, but then you get the ability for your playgroup to be like, okay, we're fine playing against all the unfun cards.
Yeah.
Or we're fine playing against all the fast mana cards.
Yeah, we like the powerful cards.
And
We're
like
fine
we'll
playing powerful
unban
magics.
like our playgroup is fine unbanning the fast mana section of the ban list, but
Yeah.
we don't want to play against braids.
Yeah.
It makes it a little bit more modal, and I think that's kind of interesting. So
Maybe that's a brackets idea. Okay,
maybe.
keep going.
And this is sort of in the same category, but it takes an imprecise tool that just a blunt object and it sharpens it. It gives it it makes it more useful, and it affects a category of card that affects Commander the most. I think the next part of this.
Yeah, it adds granularity, right? So there's a half whip measure. Right now it's like on or off, and now we get a half step in between those two things. I don't know if it's technically 50% or what, but yeah. So that I think that argument is what most people find interesting about it, is the ability to sort of like, oh, I have this card and I own it, and I do still have the ability to play it, just only in certain circumstances. I think that's very compelling, and I think a lot of the reason people probably want this list to exist is because they're building decks and they're like, man, Leovold would be great in this deck. And he's definitely of a power level that's be okay in my deck. And I just can't use this card because it's banned for a different reason than what I'm going to use it for. Lutri is the same way, I think, where people are like, oh, I just want another dual caster mage type effect in my deck. And that's not broken.
No.
Yeah. but it's banned for a totally different reason.
Right.
And so the ability to add some granularity and say like, okay, in this circumstance where it's not, broken or whatever or unfun, you could use it. And so they want that nuance to exist.
Yeah, that's a big thing here. It feels unfair that they can't play Lutri. It's not because he's not powerful and he's cute and he's otters. And when Bloomburrow came around, people were like, I just want to play.
And it's hard to make an otter deck. There's not a ton of otters. So yeah,
and you're eliminating a huge a huge piece of that without any reasoning it doesn't support how you're trying to play it.
That's true. There's like 15 legitimately playable otters. So Lutri suddenly represents like 7 or 8% of all the otters that are playable. Yeah,
it doesn't feel fair that it's banned in a way that doesn't make any sense. So there's frustration where you're like, I have this otter and I have to explain it every time.
Yeah.
He's in the 99. Like I'm spending a card on him. Yeah. And that's frustrating. So it seems like if there's a tool that can eliminate some of that frustration, we should use that tool.
Yeah.
And so I don't think that's interesting.
Yeah, I don't think that argument is crazy. Like that makes total sense to me, and I understand those people.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still against banned as commander, which we'll talk about in a second. But yeah, I think it's a reasonable position to have, and it totally makes sense. Yeah.
The next point on this is that banning commanders or banning cards as commanders, I think largely has the biggest effect on the format as a whole. And whether that's a positive or a negative is undetermined right now. But if you ban Urza, you eliminate a huge amount of Urza decks overnight, which are, subjectively unfun to play against, too powerful, and probably terrorizing game stores around the world.
I like to think a lot of those decks are in playgroups where they're signing up for it. But yeah.
But that has a big impact on making Commander better for a lot of people.
Yeah, you ban Dockside.
Yeah.
Everyone that's got a Dockside in the deck has to go and replace that one card in that deck. But the deck overall doesn't go away.
Mm-hmm. It also doesn't drop in power level that much.
Yeah. Maybe CEDH is the only place where that's a little bit different of a calculation, but for most players out there, okay, I take out this card, I find another card that's doing a similar thing, or another card I wish I had room for and I couldn't put it in before, I put it in. Mm-hmm. You ban Urza, the whole deck, all the other 99 cards. Gone. Yeah, you probably find another place to put your Winter Orb because you probably like that because you've got this deck. But whatever, some of your cards can go in other decks and whatnot, but by and large, a huge chunk of that deck, they virtually banned, quote unquote, that whole deck, right? So that's a much bigger impact in a case-by-case basis than singular cards in the 99 getting banned, which will be replaced. Because how many decks did you even have with a Dockside in it? 2, 3? Okay, that's 2, 3 cards.
And how often did you draw it? Yeah. And how
those
many
are
games
people with 10 plus decks or whatever, Yeah.
So you can really shape the format to however you want it to be by banning certain commanders.
Yeah.
Banning Golos had an enormous impact on the Commander landscape.
Right.
Because it eliminated thousands and thousands of decks overnight that didn't have a place to land. You can put Kenrith in the command zone, but that is not the
same
idea.
Especially if you were built around a certain creature type or something like that.
Or Maze's End or something like that. It wiped out a ton of decks. And for better or for worse, that's a big tool and not necessarily a tool that they have right now because there's not a lot of justification for just banning Urza.
Yeah, it goes in...
that's a poster child, I just mean as an example.
Yeah, it goes in direct conflict to the earlier point, which is like, hey, let's sharpen this scalpel so it's more pinpoint. And this is like, oh, but when you do this sometimes, it's literally like dropping a bomb and blowing the whole thing up. It's not very precise.
Sure.
So it's weird that it tugs in those two directions. In some ways, it feels like it would sharpen the scalpel, but in other ways, it actually would have the opposite effect.
Right. I think that points to the volatility of it as a tool.
Yeah.
Because it's very subjective and it's very powerful if you slip past the line. Like if you... That doesn't differentiate it from just bans. Yeah.
Which are also subjective and also very powerful if you slip past the line.
Yeah. And but I think it's like when you start looking at legendary creatures specifically, you start talking even more about people's playstyles, people's preferences. You start making broader judgments on what is good in Commander, which is something that the Rules Committee has always been pretty careful about. And because, they haven't banned mass land destruction, they haven't, the ban list hasn't been a tool for telling you how to play specifically. It'll, trim at them.
Right.
But it has never been you cannot play Urza.
Right.
Urza is unfun to play against, and we will wield a gavel, and it's gone.
Right. We won't talk about the last 2 months.
Yeah, I mean...
Previous to that.
Historically.
Yeah. I'm biting the hell out of my tongue, and it's bleeding, but we're going to keep going, because we don't want to get into that. Yeah. I mean, again, I think that... And this is the problem with having a tiered ban system, and I think a problem we're going to... we're going to talk about brackets later, but a problem that we're going to probably run into with brackets, which is banning of any kind is always drawing an arbitrary line somewhere. It's like... I don't know if you've ever played a big event like a wedding or something, and you have a budget and you have only so many people that you can invite, and then you're like, oh, but these cousins I'm really close to. But if I invite those cousins, then everybody from that ring of the family
will expect to be invited.
Otherwise, they're going to feel insulted because it's well, it'd be one thing if none of the cousins came because then you're keeping it to direct family. But as soon as these cousins, even though it's hey, I live next door to them and I was a lot closer to them, it doesn't matter. You're going to insult all those people. Then when you go to that ring, it's uh-oh. There's these ones out here, and it's where do I draw the line of where the invites are? And bans kind of can work like that, where it's I don't care where you draw the line. There's going to be a Deadeye Navigator near it. There's going to be a Consecrated Sphinx near it. There's going to be a Rhystic Study near it. There's going to be a Teferi's Protection near it. There's going to be a Dockside near it. Whatever it is, and you're going to be that could easily get looped in. But as soon as I take that step, now all this other stuff could easily get looped in. And I think this just, again, moves that arbitrary line to a different spot.
It also makes the line wider. Like we talked about before, there's a lower there's a lower threshold for banning Commander. So it makes the ban list a little bigger.
Yeah.
And that makes it a little bit more dangerous. And that makes it a little bit more impactful.
And I think it makes it more likely that we'll have more things, just total number banned, which is that a thing that we want? I obviously don't.
Yeah,
and I think that a lot of people who advocate for this don't want that either. They just don't think that's what this is going to cause, but I think it will.
So before we move on, I do want to mention that point, which we haven't delineated in this What Problems Does It Solve section. It just frees exciting legendary creatures in the 99. It opens up Ruffellos and Leovold and those kind of things, which is sort of what the people who are largely in favor of the banned as a commander list want.
Right. So we said earlier there's 5 cards that are the real candidates here, which is Braids, Arayo, Ruffellos, Leovold, and Golos. Okay. So of those 5, which ones are the exciting ones? Ruffellos?
I think Ruffellos is probably the most exciting because he's the most powerful and he's been banned for the longest.
Yeah. Braids?
No, I don't think Braids will see any play.
Arayo?
Some people will be very excited to play Arayo in the 99, yes.
Leovold?
Yeah, but I don't think there's going to be a lot of opportunity for it.
And then Golos.
That's
the big one.
Yeah, Golos is very exciting to put in your 5-color decks.
Yeah, I think people are excited to just play Golos, even if it can't be the commander, and it easily slots in without a lot of changes to your deck. So.
As long as you're playing 5 colors. But
yeah, exactly. If you got a 5-color deck, Golos could go in it, and people would be excited to have it. But it's also not a make or break card where you're like, boy, this strategy that I'm going after doesn't have a lot of support. And Golos is going to solve that. Lutri, you can kind of make that case, like we said, with the otters and things like that. But Golos is another land ramp and another mana sink.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Lutri since I just mentioned it.
Let's do it.
Because I think, we've said we're going to talk about it later, so now's later. Why not just create a banned as companion list and put Lutri on it and call it good? And then you can have Lutri as your commander if you want, and you can have Lutri in the 99 you want. I think we both agree that wouldn't be too powerful.
No, that would, in a perfect world, that's great, right? It solves this problem. He's only banned, it just says you can't play him as a companion, which is the only problem with him.
Yep.
The only thing it does is it adds complexity to the ban list, which is the argument that people sort of take the most...
Umbrage?
Umbrage is what I was like, homage. That's not it. Umbrage with.
Yeah.
Is they're
That's how you going, oh my thing.
Umbrage with, because we're commander players. We love complexity. What is wrong with a complex ban list?
Yeah.
We can handle one card being banned in a certain case. And I'm not, I'm inclined to agree with them in that case. Honestly, I think I'm closest to putting Lutri as a band as a companion. I'm closer as doing band as a companion than I am on band as a commander.
That's funny.
Is that weird?
So there would be a band as companion list, but no band as companion list.
That's where I'm at.
That's interesting.
Because it's such a special case card that we will never have this issue with again. But it's a special case card. We're never going to have this issue again. It's one card on the ban list. In the grand scheme of Magic, banning Lutri is a small issue.
Yeah, I think it's totally reasonable. I totally understand that, and I don't think it's crazy. Like I don't think it's a huge deal either way, honestly. One of the reasons that I don't like banned as commander, and I'm kind of against it, is I just don't think it makes a lot of sense to make a rule for so few cards. So a totally separate rule, a totally separate line item for, what is essentially 5 cards, maybe 6 cards.
Yeah.
And then Lutri is that to the extreme because it's a rule for one card.
One card.
Yeah, and it's like, listen, there are 30,000 cards or whatever in Magic, and in a few years there's going to be 40,000, and then there's going to be 50,000. And having just this one special case for one card, I get it. People see Lutri, they get a little sad. It's one card. Just pretend that card doesn't exist. And
yeah, because it doesn't feel like one card out of 40,000. It feels like one card out of 40 or whatever's on the ban list that you look at over and over and go, why are you here?
Yeah.
And that's frustrating.
Yeah.
But if you look at it in the scope of all of Commander and all of Magic, you're like, oh, I don't know.
It's just not a big enough deal to make this much to do about. And I think also we've recently shined a lens on it because of the fact that otters were one of the creature types that was important in Bloomburrow. So it got kind of rechurned. Even though, to be fair, I think Lutri gets brought up and has been brought up since the banning, a decent amount. But it definitely hits a fever pitch at certain moments. And one of the moments would, of course, be when otters matter. And I think so that's naturally going to die down over time. And so we shouldn't react in the moment to one of those spikes for, again, a card that is just one of, And again, they're going to bring otters back at some point, and Lutri will probably come in again. But you got to imagine that, after enough time and enough otters exist, it'll just be less and less because you won't have only 15 playable otters. At some point, you'll have 100 playable otters. It's like, Lutri might not even make the cut in my deck.
Yeah.
But until you hit that tipping point, you're going to hear this, and I think that's just kind of the cost of what it was.
There's one big downside, of course, to introducing band as a companion is you open the door to band as a X mechanic down the line.
Interesting, yeah.
I don't think they're going to make the companion mistake again.
They're never going to make companions
who
again,
knows?
Right? Like, they're just not going to do that.
Who knows? They could do band as an ambassador. Like, there could be, who knows what mechanics exist down the line that Wizards can go too far with. And it opens the door to band as an ambassador or band as a pogo stick. I don't know what they're coming up with.
Can they just ban mechanics? Just be like, Eminence is banned. Does that open that door?
I mean,
because you're basically saying companion is banned.
Well, you're just banning one.
Oh, yeah, you're right. The other companions still work.
Yeah.
The other companions still work.
So you're not banning the whole mechanic, but you're opening the door to like saying, all right, let's say this dungeon of the Mad Mage is too powerful for Commander. We're banned as a dungeon.
Interesting.
And you're like, is that, like, would that happen? I don't know. There's the rest of Magic to contend with. And you do sort of set a precedent that.
Yeah, let's say they made a mistake. Yeah. I think that's a really good point. So let's say they made a mistake with one of the dungeons.
Yeah.
And it was like, that dungeon is just ruining this. We're going to ban that dungeon. Is that different? It's like banning a card.
Yeah.
You're keeping the mechanic, but you're banning sort of, I don't know. It's hard to.
I don't know.
But, you might have changed my mind because that scenario seems reasonable to me. Like, because they can make a design mistake there just as easily as somewhere else. And
in the
your
future,
ability your ability to ban that is really tough. And so just having the ability to say, okay, if we need to, we can do that. And I don't think that would be crazy. Like, they didn't do that this time, but let's say they brought back, the dungeon mechanic and they designed a few more dungeons and one of them just happened to be broken. It's the Nadu of the dungeons or whatever, right? Like, and I don't blame the R&D for doing that. Like, they have to design cards that we get excited about and they have to sort of get near the line of what's too
Some
powerful.
stuff is too powerful.
And sometimes they just miss stuff. They're just like, we should have put a different, different guardrails on it or whatever. Like, they got to be allowed to make mistakes because otherwise they can't make the exciting stuff. But then, what if it is a dungeon or what if it's something like that?
Yeah.
I think we'd be totally fine to be like, that dungeon, no.
Get rid of that. Yeah.
So that's...
Would that go on the banned list?
Interesting. It'd just be its own rule.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have to understand that like the ban list is only going to get more complex. There's going to be more things that get added. There's going to be more exceptions that get added where it's like learn doesn't work, companion does work. Like it's going to get longer as more cards come out.
Yep.
So adding things to it is a cost because it's in anticipation of Commander lasting forever.
Right.
And that's the job of previously the Rules Committee and now Wizards to make Commander last forever in a healthy as possible way. So
But
if
can't
the
they
cost
just
is,
as easily simplify it later?
Yeah.
So if the worry is, hey, it's going to become too complex, and this increases the complexity, which reduces our complexity budget for later. Can't you say, well, we cut budget somewhere else later when we need to add this thing? You know what? It's getting too complex. We're going to change. We're going to, reban Lutri, whatever.
Sure.
That sucks because it comes off, goes on, or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
But, I think they have the ability to do that later when that is the actual problem. I mean, I don't like complexity in general. I do think it's a hurdle, but this is a small one.
It feels...
You got me. Banned as companion. I think that's fine for Lutri.
I think it's kind of fine.
That's almost like unbanning something too, which I am a proponent of. So.
Yeah, but I like all of this complexity thing that I said was just in support of the people who are like all of those are reasons for it not to do it. But for me, putting Lutri on the ban list does make sense to a lot of people, and if it's a thing that can be solved, it's a frustration that we can get ahead of, and there isn't this new qualification that we need to contend with, this whole, like, what does it take to be banned as a companion? It's like, it takes being free in every deck.
Yeah, it takes no hurdle at all. Yeah.
Then it's like, that's an interesting thing to talk about. But we'll there's another problem with external ban lists.
Oh no,
that
you just
I'm gonna
convinced
mention.
me, and now you're convinced me back the other way.
There's one thing that we do have to think about.
Okay.
Which I don't know anything about, but we're gonna find out. So we've alluded to this question before, but I do want to talk about: do we think banned as a commander actually leads to fewer bans, or will it lead to more cards being banned?
Yeah, we've mentioned this a few times. I do think it leads to more restrictions and not less.
Right.
And that's ultimately the biggest reason why I'm against it. Because I think what happens is, yes, Raphaelos comes off, Leovold comes off, Golos comes off at the regular ban list, and they're banned as commander.
Right.
So we get three half back.
I would agree that I think they will probably keep Arayo banned.
Yeah.
That is an estimation and my opinion.
Yeah.
And then...
And Braids probably stays banned.
And I think Braids is banned as a companion.
Braids comes back. Yeah, you're right.
I think those four are like fairly comfy in this list.
I can see Braids and Arayo staying just because there's not a lot of upside to bringing them back.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of fun that happens because those cards exist.
Yeah, but like if the line is do they add anything to the format, then there's a lot of things that can be fully banned. You know what I mean?
But okay, so let's say they give them all back. Whatever, you get 5 cards half back.
Yeah.
Right, and then I think will Turgid go on that list? Probably. Then does Urza, Grand Arbiter? Are we talking about Keenan? Are we like what other cards suddenly join the mix as like, oh, we'll just ban those as commanders, and then all of a sudden we might have a banned as commander list that overbalances what we got back.
Right. I think that's perfectly reasonable in the long term. I think in the short term they're not going to immediately ban a whole bunch of stuff, but I could see Wizards looking at Yuriko and being like, Yuriko's broken. We know better than ninjutsu, commander ninjutsu now.
Right.
We would never print that again, and it is too powerful for the format. Let's ban it.
It sucks because that deck's just dead. Like
So
all those cards
gone.
are just gone. Yeah.
Gone.
Or most, 90%.
And they're like,
yeah.
well, it eliminates creativity in the ninja sphere. This opens up so many ninja commanders because Yuriko was now Edgar is banned because there's no vampire commander better than Edgar. Edgar's too free. Eminence is busted. Let's ban all of those as the commander.
Yeah.
And yes, I agree. Eminence is too powerful, but it's here. So we deal with it.
We just established you can't ban the mechanic Eminence.
Nope.
So yeah, that's why it's the first one that came to my head.
So now you start looking at things differently where you're like, yes, Eminence is too powerful. Partner's too powerful.
Yeah.
Like, how do we evaluate things with, like, so you have to draw a line that you're like, power isn't enough, right? Like, power isn't enough to get a commander banned. But then you're like, okay, so what is it's just toxic play patterns. It's just things that are unfun to play against. Now we're in a very, very subjective space.
I mean, I think if you make that statement, then okay, cool. Just unban Rafellos.
Yeah.
And then you're probably like, okay. That's,
Yeah.
And,
I think if you make a band as a commander list, you kind of have to unban Rafellos, or you have to start looking at commanders for power level reasons.
But then I'm already starting the argument in my head of like, well, if you say, which I think is perfectly reasonable, say power is not enough reason to ban a card. Okay, but if you make that statement, the implications of that statement are fairly large, looking at the regular ban list now and saying that, and also saying things like, well then, if power level's not a good enough reason to ban something, then how is homogeneousness an okay reason to ban something? There's no way Golos should be banned if you're saying that, right? So, yeah. Again,
it's so hairy.
Again, now you're inviting the cousins and you gotta like, and it's like, that is...
Yeah, I get, like... And I think you start looking at it where it's like, players like powerful cards. Yurko's the most popular, Edgar's the most popular, Urza's wildly popular. Golos was
if
so
you look
powerful.
at the top 100 commanders on EDH Rec,
it's all of the cards we're talking
about. You
go,
that's really strong, that's really... You don't look at it and go, well, that's weak, and that sucks, and this is a fringe thing, and only hipsters play that. No, it's all just the most powerful crap that's fun, too. You're like, that is what people like about it.
So once you start chipping into cards for power reasons, you start eating into stuff that people really, really like. And that's not like... And we saw how people responded when Golos was banned. That's their commander. Yeah. That's their guy.
Yeah.
And you banned him because you think there's too many of him.
Yeah.
You banned Edgar because he's too good. You made him. You start really affecting people emotionally. You start really impacting how they trust the format. They're like, oh, a card that I think is fun is now banned just where it's fun.
Yeah, I don't want to make it easier for them to ban it. I want to make it harder. I want to make them more hesitant to do it. And the way to do that is to not have a half measure that exists where they can kind of feel like, oh, let's dip our toe in the water. No, you want to do that, be sure about it, and jump in the deep end.
Yeah.
I don't want you to be able to like, oh, let's test it. Let's like
half ban it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's cutie ban it.
Yeah, that's like just as bad or worse for most people because like you said, the whole deck goes away. The Yuriko ban is terrifying.
Right? But you can see the reasoning.
Yeah, but I hate it.
I know. But that's where the ban as a commander list really gets scary is because you look at it and you're like, I can point to the reasons that this is too strong. But I can also don't ban Yuriko. That would be wild.
That. Yeah. Okay, well, we've already delved into this, but let's talk about what problems are created if they do. And we've obviously, I think it's pretty clear that Rachel and I are on the side of like, we don't think banned as a commander is the greatest idea. Although surprisingly, banned as a companion, totally fine. Yeah. I never thought I'd be saying that, but yeah. But what problems? Let's lay out the case for like, okay, we shouldn't probably do this.
Yeah.
You put down that folks think it was discontinued because it was quote unquote confusing, and that's not true.
I think that is when people are like, what, you don't have a banned as commander list because you think we can't understand it. Yeah. And you're like, that was not why it was removed. It's because it adds complexity, not on your end to like understanding what the ban lists. It adds complexity to the rules committee to being like, now there's two lists of like two different qualifications. And now there's two different circles where cousins and not cousins.
Yeah, exactly.
And now there's like two different lines that we need to draw. And there's like, it's just complicated if in all of the unwritten ways than it is the written ways. Obviously, if Kinnon's banned as a commander, fine. But
yeah, I think most commander players can clock the difference.
Figure it out.
Wouldn't be able to. I do think there's ultimately a complexity budget that you have over the timeline of like, there is a point where like you can't have the ban list be so many cards that you can't really remember what's on it. You can't have it be 1,000 cards. It's too many. The format will fall apart because just people can't remember all that stuff. But we're not close enough to that line that I think that it's like, oh, if we had 6 or 7 cards that were banned as commander, it all falls apart. Nobody can remember it.
Right.
And that's not, I don't think that's, yeah.
And I don't think we're like dancing on a knife's edge of complexity where the banned as a commander list would tip us over. We're talking about longevity of the complexity budget that we have to spend long term.
Right.
Is it worth spending on Lutri because it's easy and clean? Maybe. Is it worth spending on banned as a commander list, which is its own can of worms?
Yeah.
Maybe not.
Yeah, you put down it's a juice and squeeze thing, and I think that's a big thing, which is just like we keep talking about how few cards it affects,
Right.
And it just isn't worth the amount of upheaval and disruption and opening the door, like we said, to all this other possibilities of negative stuff, of Eureka getting banned or whatever, for such little gain.
Right.
The gain is just not there.
Right. It's something that we mentioned in the what cards we could see could be unbanned episode that Jimmy and I did, was cards that go in the command zone are also sort of the easiest for people to self-police.
I love this point.
When it's in the command zone and it's face up, you have the information going into the game that you're playing against a Eureka deck. Maybe a point that was in the comments that I think is totally valid is maybe you don't have the social wherewithal, or you have the ability to reject a deck that you don't want to play against, or to reject a game that you don't want to participate in. That is fair. But at least going into the game, you see the commanders, you know what's happening. That is all on like face up when you start the game.
Well, and there's multiple ways to handle seeing something there that you are aware what it's going to do and aren't necessarily equipped for or don't want that game. So there's obviously, hey, Turgid, not my favorite. You got anything else?
Yeah.
There's that. And I understand why not everybody's sort of set up, their personality type or whatever, socially, they're not, it's tough for them to do those type of things. Right. I totally get that. That
feels like
that
a big
makes
ask.
sense. There's also, Turgid, I'm going to put away the deck I was going to play and play this other deck, which is just going to have a little bit better chance against that style of deck. That's some amount of agency. Maybe it's not perfect that you can have, but I love this point of like that. When I go, what's the power level of your deck? And you say a 7 and everybody says a 7 and that's kind of the joke. It's like, we didn't learn a lot there. And I think that's why the joke is there. You get a lot more information from just looking what deck they're going to play. And just being able to say like, oh, it's Urza. Okay. I could change my deck. I could ask you to change yours. I can always leave and try and find another game. There's a lot of different steps I can take here, but at least I have agency in that situation. A lot more agency, and probably the most agency we have, because we have the most amount of information when we see what the deck is. So to create a rule that's going to, layer on top of what we already have is a pretty good working solution to this, which is just like look, see, then deal with, take your choice of A, B, or C. Yeah. Of how you want to deal with it.
This requires people to have an awareness of like when they see Turgid, they know what the deck is. That is only invested players that have that immediate knowledge, but they will learn. And that is like, now I see it's Turgid again, and I don't want to play against that deck now. Like, I think people are hesitant to, like, if we banned Leovold or if we unbanned Leovold was like one of the things.
Yeah.
But if we unbanned
just
him,
straight up unbanned.
Yeah, if he's in the command zone, you don't necessarily know that what's going to happen to you if you've never played against Leovold before.
Right.
Because it doesn't say you don't have any hand ever.
Right. You don't have cards.
That doesn't say it on the card. So like protecting players from that situation is probably worthwhile. But it's like when Leovold is in the command zone, you will eventually learn what Leovold means.
Yeah, and I don't know if so much emphasis should be put on protecting players from ever having any experiences that they would consider negative. I don't know that that's just the way life and gaming works. Like, I always like to compare to other games to see like how reasonable it is, because if you can see it in other things that have existed for longer and in different forms, that kind of thing exists, you might just be able to conclude like that is a piece of it that's going to be there and should be there. And like if I play basketball on Tuesday nights with, at the gym down the street, like there's some guys that don't pass the ball and there's some guys that don't get back on defense and there's some people that like
shove,
boss people around, or they're rough or whatever. And that is a thing that you can't take out of playing basketball on Tuesday nights at the gym. So I just have to be able to navigate it. And part of getting there, and there's certain things across the line, right? Like people that are too rough, that's the thing where somebody needs to go talk to that person, hey, don't be so rough because you're going to hurt somebody.
Right.
But the guy that doesn't pass that much, you kind of have to learn that and then either try not to be on that person's team, don't pass it to them. It's just, you have to deal with it. And there's always going to be some of these people, and there's always going to be some of these decks, and there's always going to be some of this. And that's part of getting, if you have this idealized version of what Commander is and you're never going to experience any of this stuff, it's not real. That's not going to happen. It doesn't matter how many cards get banned or whatever. There are going to be situations where like, I didn't realize that card was going to do that.
Yeah.
That sucks. Next time I'll either look out for it or just realize that happens sometimes in Magic. Yeah.
Yeah, and I like if you're looking for this idealized situation, you're just not going to find it at the game store. You have to curate a playgroup.
You won't find it in your playgroup for a while. You'll have to build
it's
it, right?
It's going to take time. Like it's not you can't create this magical utopia, and even then, somebody's going to create a deck that they bring, and they go, "Whoa, that was okay."
And a lot of times that will be you.
Yeah,
it happens to us all the time.
All the time. We both built Orvar.
Yeah.
We both built Orvar.
Or you're in the middle of play. Go, sorry. I didn't realize. Sorry. I did. Yep. Sorry. And I built it. And I am the one causing the pain, knowing that it's being caused and being like, sorry, I didn't realize this.
Yeah.
So if you can do it on, when you're aware of it and you're the one doing it, like it's going to happen sometimes. So I don't necessarily give too much credence to like attempts to never have that happen to new players.
Sure.
That's part of the experience of playing Commander, and you should kind of get used to that happening as part of the fun of it, and being able to go also like, no, it's cool. Like, this is cool what you're doing. I don't want to play against this again, but let's see you play it out because you built it and it's kind of cool. It is doing the thing, right? I have no cards in my hand.
Yeah.
Like, that's nuts. And
what do you got next?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But also, like, you're going to win this game, and I don't want to take away from the fact that you thought this card goes with this card, this goes with this card, and it does, and it works, and I'm going to lose. That's okay. Yeah. Do I want to play this every game? No, but like, that doesn't mean you're a bad person.
But look at it go.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's definitely a thing where we have to get used to being able to police the cards that are across from us and be able to speak up and advocate for the kind of game you want to play, or to be able to make it through a game that you don't want to play.
Or have it, so much is about, I've found about setting expectations too. Just seeing Turgid and saying, okay, I'm going to switch to this other deck. And then knowing like there's a pretty good chance in this game, like I don't do much or the Turgid deck goes off. But what I'm going to do is mulligan to a hand that has some removal and try and like handle it as best I can. And I played just a couple weekends ago, and they wanted to play a CDH game. The other three people in the pod. I didn't have a CDH deck on me. So I was just like, okay, the most powerful deck I've got, I'm going to play that one. I probably will get steamrolled. It's okay, though. I'll just do the best. But going in knowing that's the situation, I wasn't salty about it all when I did get steamrolled. It was like, fine, I didn't have a deck that could hang in this. That's okay. You guys are doing cool stuff, and I'm doing my best to just try and hang in there as like the scrappy, I could do this all day guy. And
like, I'll be here in the corner throwing wrenches.
Yeah, exactly.
And you can kill me when it is convenient.
And just knowing that didn't make it frustrating at all to me. Yeah. I just knew that going into the game. So I think that's a part of it as well.
So we've talked about this risk of the banned as a commander list crossing lines into banning commanders that are either too powerful or making big decisions on subjective playstyles, on like whether discard is okay, whether theft is okay.
Right.
Like, are you going to ban send triplets?
Right.
That commander sucks. I do not like playing against it.
Yeah.
Are you going to ban it? Really? It's bad. So...
Because then you end up with a format where it's like, well, listen, unless you're attacking with creatures, we don't like it. Storm? No.
No.
Stealing stuff? No.
No.
Mass discard? No. Mass land destruction? No.
Mill?
Stacks? No. Mill? No. Like, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, if we're not careful, and then what do? We already said the homogeneity.
Homogeneousness?
The homogeneousness. I was like, what is that? Sounds like humongousness, but whatever. Yeah, we already said that was kind of undesirable, and now we're pushing it that way by making, like you said, a lot of judgments.
Maybe not even pushing, just opening the door to that. Like, I don't think we'd immediately jump into banning 15 cards overnight. I don't think Yuriko would be banned overnight.
Right.
But you start opening the door and considering more cousins, and suddenly you got 400 people at your wedding. And it's full of commanders nobody wants to play against.
Yeah, everything's banned and everything's frowned upon, and people feel justified in thinking like, that's banned, and this is similar to that banned thing, so everybody knows nobody likes that, and
and it just feels like it can be heavy-handed if it starts getting used liberally. I did want to mention one more thing that I
forgot about this. Yeah,
when they originally removed banned as a commander, it went along with commander being playable on MTGO, which MTGO cannot support. It's the only way to play commander online, but that isn't spell table, digitally. And it doesn't support multiple ban lists in different zones. It's banned or not. So if it wouldn't be able to support a banned as a commander list.
Right.
I don't know if that's the case for MTGO today, but it was the case for when it was introduced to commander, and ultimately was it informed the reduction to one list.
Which is so funny to me because when we talk about juice and squeeze and how many cards things affect, like, oh, good, we made this rule based partially on the 12 people that play Commander on Mitgo.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that play on Mitgo.
It ain't that many.
Even still.
If it's more than 2,000, I'm surprised. People in the world, right? There's like, 50 million people that play Magic? Who knows how many play Commander? But it's a very small percentage.
Spell Table definitely opened up the opportunity for people to play
it's
less.
in the tens of,
way,
it's probably 10,000 or less people that play Spell Table daily. And we're talking about, millions of people that play. It's such a small thing. But anyway, Spell Table, obviously you can, the ban, like Mitgo just seems like a crazy reason.
Yeah, it's that was part of the reason why it was merged into a list. So that it is an added negative that I don't know how much we care about, but was on the list when it initially was eliminated.
That's crazy.
So it could hypothetically make the band as a companion thing impossible.
On digital clients. But should you be making rules because of digital clients? And I don't think so. At all. Although we have heard that Hasbro is trying to develop or Wizards trying to develop a online Commander focused some sort of client because they know Arena's not it.
Right.
This is something they announced recently, and we can talk at some point about whether we think that's even doable.
Sure, yeah.
So we could see the situation again if that comes to fruition, where they could make rules based on what is technologically possible.
Right.
Which
it's in Wizards' control now, so that is they will consider it more heavily than perhaps the rules committee would have in the past.
For sure, you can only assume they would consider
because it's their product.
Yeah, exactly.
So those are that's the case against the problems that the band as a Commander list sort of creates, and as we've talked about throughout this episode. I think we are generally against it as a tool. I think it's a little ham-fisted. It feels a little bit like the idea is that it's a scalpel and it gives you half measures, but it can get thicker and thicker and turn into a hammer when you start being more flexible about what is bannable and what isn't.
Yeah. I think when you boil it down, my worry is it'll lead to more bans and more restrictions and not less.
That is my concern as well.
I don't think it will free up enough to make what it cages it'll overbalance in the wrong direction is what I feel like will ultimately happen.
Yeah.
Just unban Rafellos. Just unban, I think you could unban all those cards. Leovold is probably the least likely. Braids, because I think that the community would self-police out Braids. I think that in the way that you don't see a lot of Turgrids at tables. Like
Turgrid's just more fun. Yeah. Braids is not a fun commander to play. Turgrid is like, oh, you're stripping people's hands. I get the stuff. That's fun.
Wow.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's why Hullbreacher is banned and Narset isn't. It's because Hullbreacher gives you all the tokens, which is fun.
Yeah, all the treasures. Yeah. So
yeah.
So I think that they would all mostly be fine. People wouldn't end up playing that much, and there would be a little bit of grumbling, but there's already grumbling about the Turgrids and stuff of the world, and it wouldn't eclipse that. I think that's a better solution if people are saying, I wish I could play those cards, than the banned as commander part.
And, we're sort of tepidly fine with banned as a companion.
Yeah, that's weird, but you're right. It makes a really good point. Like, I just think if they have to use the scalpel against mechanics, it's different because their ability to what other
this
tool
one doesn't
do
snowball.
They have? Yeah, this is snowball in any way. What do? You ban something else's companion? There's nothing else that's even a nominee. So
unless they go back to the companion which would be shocking.
But if they do that, they are already asking for it.
Yeah.
Because what the heck? That was a huge failed experiment. They're not doing it.
There was a pitch years ago about a list that was banned outside the library. And it included commanders and Lutri.
Oh, just.
And I think that's more confusing.
Yeah.
You're like, what does that mean? Where is that?
Any rule that after you read the rule, you have to read the explanation of the rule and then like.
Banned not in the 99.
Yeah, banned as companion makes sense too. If it's just one line item and you don't need any explanation.
Yeah. So I want to talk about like. There's a lot of desire for this band as a commander list.
Yeah.
And I think it's because we are so impacted by commanders. And a lot of people want to just play these cards in the 99, but I think it's also like people want to see busted like Urza's banned. So I think it's because commanders are so much a big part of this format that not being able to be flexible on this is feels dumb. And I wonder if there's a way to use a future bracket system or use some sort of separate system to answer some of the solutions that this offers. Do you know what I mean? Find a tool like that answers some of the problems that Banned as a Commander answers, but isn't strictly a Banned as a Commander list.
Are you talking about like a bracket system?
Like a bracket system? Yeah, but like how could the bracket system consider this, I guess? I was thinking about this. What if the bracket system was just legendary creatures?
So the bracket system kind of,
it put commanders into buckets instead of all the 99.
Interesting. And I think one of my main problems with the bracket system, we've started to think about it, obviously, as we've had conversations with Wizards, and that forces you to kind of consider, like, well, what does a good bracket system look like, and what are the problems with this? And the problem I always run into is, like, once you start ranking cards, whether you've got 3 brackets, 4 brackets, 5 brackets, whatever, I got to put them into these buckets, it's the cousin problem all over again, where you're like, well, I think I have to rank every single card. Besides the ones that go in whatever the lowest bucket is.
Sure.
And so you end up being like, because, like it's even when they did their video, they start talking about Staff of Domination, and you're like, if we're going to Staff of Domination, if we're talking about considering where that goes in the brackets.
I had no idea that used to be banned, by the way.
Yeah. Again, Karavec, right?
Yeah.
Then if we're going that deep, then like I've had to assign a number to 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 cards. I'm going to have to do it to another 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 cards.
Means they're going to have to assign numbers as they release.
It's nuts. What I like about the legendary creature idea is there's just a lot fewer of them.
A lot fewer.
So if you suddenly have to be like, okay, well, we got to rank all the legendary creatures, that feels a lot more doable than all 30,000 cards that have ever existed.
Yeah, there's a couple thousand, and like you don't have to rank probably 2,000 of the bottom two-thirds, right?
You probably don't even have to rank.
So like
you're probably only ranking max 1,000.
What if the tier list is just commanders,
How
right?
do you rank the partners?
You don't. I don't know. It's like
you just rank. Listen, if Timna's in there, it's a 1.
It's
or it's
if,
a 5.
If you're playing
or
partners, you're playing 4 colors. You're probably playing good stuff. You're making an estimation.
Yeah, but if one of them is this, is Thrasios, top bracket. And if one of them's Timna, if they
say draw a card on them, they're in the.
You're just whatever
bracket.
one the highest one is. Yeah.
It's. I kind of like this idea, and I was thinking about it when we were doing this episode. Is like gathering notes and stuff, and because you can put Urza and Korvold and Chulane in a bucket, and even like Tatiova, and then it says these commanders are of this level of power level. That's what we expect that power level to be, and then if you build the card, you have an understanding of how people perceive your commander. We expect it's this thing, and then it solves this issue of like it's an Urza deck, but it's an equipment Urza deck, so it's fine. And you're like, no, it's Urza. It's in this bucket. I don't know, like whatever restrictions you put on it, the expectations that I come in with is that's Urza, and you will be treated like it is.
Yeah.
Or like you're playing.
Yeah, and if you don't want to be considered that way, then
pick another commander. Yeah. Kinnan, you're in this bucket, and that's what I anticipate about your commander. I'm playing a 1 bucket or a 4 bucket commander, and it's not going to be perfect, but it's a very clear line. And it's drawn in the sand because who knows what's in your 99? It could be anything, but it tells you the expectations, which is kind of what this list is all about, is just having a simple way to determine if your decks are compatible.
So it assigns your deck a number basically based on the commander.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
and obviously people are going to be like, all right, I picked a number 4. I picked a Feldergriff. It's in 4, and I built a 10 deck underneath.
Right. You can always do it because mono blue shell we know can be CEDH almost with anything.
With the new Jellyfish commander, like you can build a really busted deck. But
I don't think those people, you're never going to be able to legislate for them.
I agree.
They're going to find the line, and that's okay. Those people are going to do the those people thing, and we can't make rules for that. For like sort of maliciously trying to find the loopholes.
Right.
Yeah. I think that's okay too. Like if your system, that's your hole, that's okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's just a lot easier to rank all the legendaries. And like you said, it probably is like 3 buckets. These are 1s, these are 2s, and then everything else is a 3. And then, yeah, that's interesting. I liked what we kind of talked about earlier of just explanation for stuff as like unfun, too powerful, homogenous. If those are your three things, and then your playgroup can decide, oh, it's Golos. I know it's on there because of it's homogenous. I'm okay. You
I don't
can
care
play
about
it.
that. Yeah, go nuts.
Power level, I want to stay away from. Or unfun, we don't want to do the unfun ones.
Sure.
But power level is okay. That's interesting to me
Opens
as
up
well.
Moxons in your playgroup. That's fine. Go nuts.
Yeah. So
And that communicates to the people though, so they can make decisions for themselves, which has always sort of been the intention of the Commander ban list. Is we suggest you ban it, but if you would like to unban it, as long as everybody's okay with it, go for it. Which makes, it's sort of been the soft answer for Lutri, is like, if everybody at the table is fine with it, go for it. If everybody's okay with your Grizzlebrand deck, sure. I don't know why they would be, but that's cool.
I mean, Grizzlebrand in the command zone, it's not that bad.
I don't know. I don't want to play against it. I guess I'm glad it's in the command zone and I know it's coming.
Yeah, it's coming, but it's going to take a little while. Like, it's not the
It's gonna
easiest
take
to
a
get to. You got to do a lot of work.
There's only one
first.
dark ritual in
Yeah,
this
exactly.
deck.
You need, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I do think that the interest in a band as a commander list suggests a desire of the players. I don't think that tool is correct, but I do think that this bracket system has the potential to fill some of these holes.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know. To me, the bracket system is trying to help with the Rule Zero conversation, and Band as Commander is trying to help with access to certain cards or not.
Yeah.
Like, I really believe a lot of this comes from people wanting to play a card in a situation where they know they're using it in a way that is not the reason it was banned. Like, Leovold in my 99, Golos in my 99, Raphaelos in my 99. Those feel okay because and most people are saying like, I get why it's banned in the command zone because then it's really broken. But if I want Lutri in my deck, it's just a dual caster mage and we know that's fine. And that frustration causes them to be like, look around and be like, well, what is the easiest way to, make it so I can do what I want to do with it? Oh, ban as commander.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's an interesting problem and you understand the frustration, but I think the wider ramifications are something that doesn't get considered enough, largely by the population who it's not their job to consider the wider ramifications.
I mean, ultimately, everything we've talked about today, there's very few cards.
Yeah.
6, less than 10.
Yeah.
That it really would have any immediate effect on. It's just so few cards that it feels like juice and squeeze, just amount of time spent thinking about it. We probably spent too much time talking about it just now versus what it would actually do. Yeah. And we know, too, in recent years, all the unbanning stuff they've done, nobody plays the cards they're unbanning except for Flash.
Yeah, if they unban
Flash. It wasn't Flash. It was Protean Hulk, right? That
sure,
they let go.
yeah.
Yeah. So,
and then they had to ban
then
Flash.
they had to ban Flash.
Yeah.
But that was the only one where it's like the unbanning kind of went bad. Everything else, the unbanning is just like, no one plays it.
Yeah.
Like
Painter
it didn't
Servant.
matter.
Yeah, Worldfire.
No. Yeah.
And there's a lot of cards that I think if Braids was unbanned, I don't think it would see a ton of play because it's just not that interesting and it's just not that good.
Yeah. So I think if you're frustrated, that's the way. Is like, hey, I want to play Raphaelos. Let's just ask for it to be unbanned is better than I get it though. It feels more convincing to be like, no, I don't want it unbanned. I understand it's broken. But it doesn't have to be banned as commander, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm all the way. Raphaelos, unban it. Braids, unban it. Like that's fine. Golos, unban it. I think that's the fight I want to have.
Sure. Now, to the listeners, what do you think about reinstating a band as a commander list? What legendary creatures would you put on the list? Was there one that we didn't talk about that you were like, well, this guy definitely should be banned as a commander or, unbanned? Like maybe you think Emrakul should be banned as a commander. I don't know. Let us know. We'll take any of that information to the commander format panel, which we're having, discussions about banningness.
I will say, and this has always been, or not always, but it's been true for a long time because of our positions on the Commander Advisory Group and now the CFP. Give us the comments. Give us your thoughts. We do read this stuff. We do see this stuff, and we do pass it along, right? Like in a general sense, we say, oh, we're hearing a lot of this, or we're seeing a lot of that. And our job is to pass along what we think is going to make the best decision for the most amount of people when they decide things like this. So
we had this conversation because of comments in the 99 or in the 99. because of comments in the comments section on videos about asking about Banned as a Commander. Why didn't you talk about Banned as a Commander? And now we did.
Yeah, so absolutely in the comments or on Twitter or on Blue Sky or on Instagram or any of that stuff, just let us know what you think and what you're seeing out there, because we always love that perspective.
Yeah. If you want to pick up any of the cards that we talked about here today, you're like, oh, that Urza guy, he sounds cool. Go to cardkingdom.com/command and pick them up. Card Kingdom has a ton of cards. My favorite thing in the whole world. So you can get sealed product, you can get singles, you can get any of the different printings. This around Foundations time. They have the new mana symbol foils.
Ooh, yeah, those
which
are sweet.
Really cool looking. And if you're after those, you're looking for very specific cards and you want to shop at a place that has a ton of options for you. So you've got one package coming in the mail and it's showing up safely and professionally on your doorstep. Plus, you can trust the Card Kingdom has a great team to take care of you if something does happen to that package. They've got a huge team of people and they will take care of you as they've taken care of us for many years.
Yeah, and of course, one thing I'd like to say too is it's around the holidays. We spend a lot of time with friends and family. If you've ever been looking to get friends or family to try Magic, Foundations is like the best moment to do that. It's the holidays, so there's
a starter kit.
It's gifting season.
Jumpstart.
Yeah, this is a perfect combination, I think, to sort of, get your family and friends into. I did a fish hook in my mouth for those that couldn't see it. So again,
audio only is like what?
cardkingdom.com/command. And of course, once you get all those cards, or also great for holiday gifts is ultrapro.com/command. They have tons of cool product. Their stuff is beautiful. I love the Mana 8 line. If you know somebody who's got their favorite deck is a mono red deck, we might know a person like that. Getting the Mana 8 red, deck box, sleeves, and playmat, so they all match, is a really great way to sort of show your love for somebody and give them something that they might really enjoy on their battlefield. So again, ultrapro.com/command. Okay, well, it's funny. We do these episodes a lot, and you've heard me say this probably a million times at this point. It's like, is there enough there for a whole episode?
Yeah.
And now this episode feels like it's been a little long, but I did want to have an end step.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so this is the end step, where we talk about something cool outside the world of Magic. There's a podcast that I sort of stumbled onto, and I've really been enjoying. I think your fiance would really enjoy this podcast as well, because it's sort of about filmmaking. Yeah. And it's called What Went Wrong, and the hosts it started out as a podcast about like the big bombs, like movies that just didn't do well at the box office, and
what
them
happened to make them go
really
bad,
researching like what happened to sort of make them go wrong, and what were all the little decisions and the problems and the fights on sets, and the you learn about, and I know exactly why I found this podcast is because I worked on a couple of the movies and I came across it, and Evan Almighty was a movie I cut the trailer for.
Sure. And
I worked on the Universal backlot and saw all the animals being escorted back and forth to the sound stages for like a few months. And so it was fun to hear them talk about, like, it was kind of a disaster. Like, it was, that movie didn't do very well, and there was a lot of problems because, if you've got to get 2 of every animal, and they found out like, oh, you can't have lions and zebras in the same shot, right? Because they're lions and zebras. So then you have to like green screen comp like 55 different layers. You can't even have like 2 males of the certain species together.
Right,
so you had to, that's stuff they're all finding out during anyway, really fascinating. Really fascinating. They do a bunch of movies.
They just DoorDashed 2 of each animal, please. Hey, 2 zebras. Oh, you don't have an extra zebra? I need a platypus from over here.
Yeah. We used to come to the lot. I would drive on in the morning, and there would just be people like escorting 2 elephants like across the parking lot into the soundstage, and
fine, these 2 like each other, but don't introduce them to the rabbits.
Yeah, exactly. So they tell all those stories about all kinds of like, movies. And then, they've started talking about even successful movies because, the funny thing about movie making business is like, just because the lead actor and the lead actress like hated each other and wouldn't talk to each other doesn't mean that's not a great movie that's like won Academy Awards. Like funny stuff happens on movies. Or like Gladiator famously, like they started shooting that movie and they only had like 30 pages of the script done.
Oh my God.
It won Best Picture and they were writing the script while they were shooting it. So it's crazy stories like that. Like I said, I worked on Evan Almighty and Lone Ranger have both been mentioned, and they've teased that they're going to talk about John Carter, which I also worked on. So
did you?
Yeah, horrible.
Oh, God, we make fun of John Carter all the time.
What got me to quit the movie trailer business was Lone Ranger followed by John Carter. Like that was a 1-2 punch that I just couldn't survive. I was just like, because Because those are movies that bombed and everyone knew they were going to bomb for like the year leading up. So it was just miserable to work on one than the other. Anyway.
You just knew they were going to bomb before
everybody
they
knew.
came out?
Everybody knew. Everybody knew.
Man.
These are like not.
Taylor Kitsch just didn't have it.
Just spend $1 bajillion and you're looking at the dailies and everything. You're like, I don't know. The movie's just not good. I'm sorry. But like everybody tried. There's talented people working on it and everything. But like it's not good. No one's going to watch this. Anyway, so if you want to hear the stories behind like some of your favorite bombs or blockbusters, What Went Wrong is the name of the podcast. We'll put a link in the show notes. It's great.
Very fun. All right. Before we go, we got to say thank you to our amazing team here at the Command Zone. Thank you to Rachel Kendra, Karina Cruz, Sebastian Salazar, Gaurav Galati, Jamie Block, Jordan Pridgeon, Shake Boss, Eric Lem, Josh Murphy, Manson Lung, Christopher Matista, Evan Limburger, Sam Waldo, and yours truly, Jimmy Wong.
Thanks everybody for watching.
Bye.
Peace. I almost forgot to say it.
Thank you for your attention. For further inquiries, send an email to commandcast@rocketjump.com or ask us on Twitter @JFWong and @JoshLeeQuai. See you later, alligator.
Greetings, humans.